with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today, Victor Pires. So for the past 20 years, Victor has been investigating the natural and social worlds, both academically and practically. But the question on his mind has been about humans and their relationship to growing food. His PhD in urban agriculture was fruitless, but his studies and practices in permaculture, organic market gardening, holistic management, and anthroposophy have been bountiful. In 2015, Syntropic Agroforestry crossed his pathway through an unlikely source, and all of a sudden, the question seemed conceptually answerable. So since 2016, Victor has been actively working, researching, and more recently teaching Syntropic Agroforestry. And as he puts it, Syntropy is both a blessing and a curse, just like being a free human, which I just think is kind of a magical thought. So get ready to talk trees as Victor Pires takes us on a journey through the what, why, and how of these fantastic food forests. And with that, Victor, please take it away. Go ahead and share your screen.
Awesome.
And we'll get started. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Julia. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the introduction. Let's get things moving. Thanks, everybody, for showing up. It's always a pleasure to be talking to you, to be talking about Syntropic Agroforestry, anything kind of plant-related or land management-related. Few contacts there, but let's just get moving. You got to know me a little bit. Here's more or less what I want to be talking about. I just want to introduce myself, just to give you a little bit of my context, what I've done so far and what kind of informs my thoughts, my ideas, and things that I'm going to be presenting here. Then, of course, a little bit about Syntropic Agroforestry, what it is and what it tries to achieve. Some key principles and practices, which I hope is going to be useful for you to start thinking, hopefully applying your own landscapes. And then how can we play with those processes in terms of balancing? To me, it's all about life processes that we need to be balancing, just like in our lives. So we have to be balancing a lot of variables. And so would be in our productive system, our regenerative productive system. And then just to finish it off, some kind of climatic and landscape considerations. And in the end, what are the challenges and the processes that we have to go through as well to be able to hopefully achieve our productive and regenerative goals. So a little bit about me. So that picture on the top there is basically the first syntropic farm in Australia that I've started with Scott. The side on the right there on my screen, I'm not sure if I use on the right as well. It's basically about 1,500 square meters. Syntropic system that we introduced there, that's about 2 years old, and the one on the left is about 3,500 square meters, or almost an acre, that I've done it by myself. And that was kind of the beginning of Syntropy in my life, kind of thing, in terms of the practical sense, and also the first syntropic activity that happened in Australia. At that time, I was living in Australia. I am now in Brazil. So I do have a little bit of an addiction on doing courses, and I have done many courses at university level, but also and actually much more productive at non-university levels, because I feel university these days, they are a little bit behind the ball with the reality. So I do enjoy doing quite a few courses, some of them being holistic management, the war stories course that I kind of just finished, also the Regradiums platform. Lots of biodynamics. I'm a big fan of biodynamics and anthroposophy, as Julia mentioned when she introduced me. Market gardening, bush regeneration, so on and so forth. That page would really be too small to put all the courses that I've done it in the past, let's say 20 years. I tend to do probably 5 courses a year, if not more. In terms of Syntropy, it's crossed my life in 2016, the beginning of 2016, maybe in the end of 2015. And then I did my first course here in Brazil at Sítio Semente, one of the most kind of featured properties. If you've seen the Life in Syntropy documentary, if you haven't, I highly recommend. It's really, it's very hopeful, let's say, to put it the list. And then since then, I basically got hooked, got addicted, done over 10 courses with a whole range of people. I have done courses with Ernst, as we all should. But I've also done courses with pretty much everybody that sits right below him, people that has 20, 30 years of syntropic experience under his guidance as well. So I was able to get a really broad perspective, because one of the things that we have to consider, the good or the bad, is that there isn't a lot of tangible, concise, summarized syntropic information. There's a few articles from Ernest, there is a few books from some of his students. There is a few theses, a PhD thesis, a couple of master's theses, and a few dribs and drabs of research. So it's not easy. It's not like we've got a holistic management handbook, or if we get a permaculture manual and we've got all the things that we can just study over and over. So I felt that I need to really connect with people, really had to get the stories really behind it. And so I just ended up doing courses with everybody and really seeing how everybody was kind of looking and applying it, because it's a very broad framework, even though I think it's probably the best botanically speaking framework in food production, but it does lack a few other things. And I'm so glad that I have done many other kind of courses with other frameworks that really helps me to make Syntropy better, or so I hope. So I've got those two sides of my life. One is a researcher side, the other one is a practitioner side. I just love research. I love studying, loving getting to know new things, but I also love to get my hands dirty. So I've been growing my own food for more than 20 years, been managing a coffee shop, also managing a hydroponic farm. As I've said, I had the first Syntropic farm in Australia with Scott. We also run the first Syntropic course, myself and Tiago, from Syntropic Solutions as well. We brought Namaste and Patricia Vaz there, and we ran what to me was by far the best Syntropic course I've ever done. It was such a beautiful, magical experience where the 5 of us came together. There was Carol as well in the background, came together and just really created something really magical, really unique. And then since then, I've been also developing. I've lived in Ukai, a small little town in Australia, where I basically full-time practice, probably planted about a hectare worth of Syntropic systems all by hand. Probably I've dug about 1.2 kilometers of beds. And then I decided late on 2023 to move to Brazil, because I needed to start doing something on my own land, because with those systems, they are pretty long-term, and there's just so much that we can be doing experimentally in other people's land. So I really decided to come back to Brazil and take over my family's property. So to me, my question is, how can we actually grow food regeneratively? That's, I think, probably a lot of people's minds got that question. And for me, it's just not one framework that will do it. Also, over those years, I really realized that with Syntropic, perhaps more than any other framework that I came across, specialist knowledge can only go so far. Consulting work and design work and that kind of stuff really plays a minimal role into the life of a Syntropic system. And once I realized that, I really started to move more into education, into my own education. How can I do it? Because the recipes was just not delivering anything for me. So I really need to figure out how I could do it. As a modern human being that is ultra busy, has so many things in our minds and things that we have to do. How can we actually manage this living organism? And then I decided to then move into education, which is something that I always enjoyed. So that was the beginning of kind of the Syntropic Gardener. And I just want to bring to your attention here that I really don't consider myself an expert on anything. I really try to get as broad as a perspective as I can. Try to really be a generalist, sorry. And I just want to emphasize as well that a lot of the information that I'm going to be presenting, some comes from the primary source, comes from Ernest, from the courses and the publication that he's got. Probably 30% comes out of his own. I would say another 40% comes from all those practitioners that have been working with him, and I understanding they all perhaps to me better at communicating, a bit more tangible to grasp. I feel sometimes Ernest really talks high level, and unless we have this kind of high level practice and experience, it's hard to follow. So I really got a lot from all of those other people, kind of especially slightly lower people, but we're talking much more kind of day-to-day activities, and very, very happy to have met Patricia Vaz, who is probably my main mentor. really taught me a lot about Syntropic, but really taught me a lot about how can we, what are the intentions that we need to have, what we need to hold behind ourselves beyond the technicalities. So almost, taught me how to love kind of that Syntropic word. So very grateful for her. And then the last kind of 30-40% is really my own research. And as I am seeing other pictures and other frameworks and how I'm bringing things together. Cool, enough about me. Let's get moving. So what is Syntropic Agroforestry? I mean, we can't speak about Syntropic without talking about Ernst, Swiss fella that came to Brazil 30, 40 years ago. But without, I don't think we need to talk about him. I think for me, more important is what else the question that he had on his mind when he's, set up on that quest to, really produce food, good quality, human grade food in a regenerative way. And to me, as I understand, he was at that time working as in some kind of the chain of genetic modifications, trying to literally change plants to suit the environment, the degraded environment that we've created. And as I understand, he one day just had a question, should we really be changing the plant to suit the degraded environment, or should we actually change the degraded environment to suit the plant? And I'm not defending, I'm not criticizing the ones that try to do genetic modification. I think is their quest, is there, if they see a light in the end of that tunnel, that's fine. But I think for Ernest and for me, it makes much more sense that we go towards changing the environment. So for me, it's very important that we are always working with questions, because questions make us move and questions make us be open to answers as well. But sometimes we have to hold questions for a very, very long time. And I believe Ernest has been holding that question for a very long time as well. Because as I understand, perhaps one of the reasons why he hasn't really published the book is because the work is not finished. Perhaps he's still got more things that he wants to work with. So, right. So if the idea here is that we've got to change the degraded environment to suit the plant, then we got to look, okay, so what is the environment? What are the environmental characteristics that we need to work or can work with? So I think the first question that he's been working with is, where does our food come from? And as I understand, from that questions, you start to look at the broad range of food stuff, and there's a whole range. Of course, I'm not trying to put that all the food comes from one category, but one of the characteristics is that those food crops comes from what he calls perhaps a system of abundance, of a place of abundance. And what is a place of abundance? It's a place that is resilient, it's a place that is stable, it's a place that has a good balance between carbon and nitrogen. It's a place that there is lots of proteins. It's a place that large animals and humans can get their livelihoods out of it. So with that understanding, he started to go, okay, so there is a few things for us to work with. I'm looking at my degraded land, and they clearly do not look like those lush, abundant places, be it a rainforest or a temperate forest, or Mediterranean forest, or a savanna, or many other environments that we find in our beautiful planet. But one characteristic is that the majority came from this stable place, a place where there was decomposition, there was cycles, there was many things happening. And more importantly, perhaps for us, is that those food crops did not require any external inputs. Nobody was really fertilizing, nobody was really bringing irrigation, bringing pesticides. So, okay, we were able to do that before. How can we start to bring that into modern day ideas? So we need to understand, okay, what environment does a plant need? And that's here just a little picture from a coffee growing in a natural forest in Ethiopia. It's one of the kind of key examples that people talk about in the syntropic world is, okay, so what is that place of origin? What happens with that coffee growing in that place of origin? So it's very important for us to go back into that original starting point and look, what are the dynamics, what's happening as well. But also we need to go beyond that. We also need to go, okay, what does the traditional knowledge about those crops, how do they play with those plants? What have they done to perhaps make them better? What kind of rituals or what kind of practice did they have? And also very important for us in this time, in this day and age, is to also look at the modern cultivator practices, because we have brought something else into the equation. we have brought a modern consciousness into the equation with modern tools, modern ways of doing things. Some are good, some are bad, but we had to look at those three items for us to start to create a picture of, okay, what can we do? What are the tools that we got at our disposal? What are the knowledge that we've got here? And how can we start to move towards that place, let's say that coffee forest, but now with a modern consciousness and modern practices. So we really need to look at those plants and also how they have evolved. What was the evolution from 10,000 years ago to today? What has changed? And then we start to look at, all right, so a specific plant might need some physical aspects in terms of its soil structures and things like that. Also some of its chemical aspects, and the water comes into there as well. Anything that is in terms of, exchanging and helping that plant to grow out. pH is probably a classic one that we are always looking for. Biological agents, both in the ground, which is starting to become lots more popular from the, some really good work from beautiful people out there that are also offering courses. We need to start to understand what is the biology of the soil and how important it is to maintain it, a thriving biology, but also what's the biology above the soil. We also we tend to have a picture here that all the insects are, problematics, but the idea is that, very few organisms on the planet are actually pathogenic. Most of them are on our side. I will actually say all of them in our side. So we just have to understand and look at them from perhaps a bigger perspective. And then climatic aspects as well. It's going to be very important for us to understand those nuances so we can actually create something where that plant thrives. This is the goal. We got to create an environment so that plant can fulfill its function without our help, because it doesn't need our help, or it's not supposed to need our help. So we got a few things that we can work with. Also, and perhaps more important, we really need to look at the dynamics of those environments. How are things moving? And perhaps more important, what are the extremes of those places, of our places? How is our soil? How degraded is our soil? How cold? How dark? How is our water cycle, our small water cycle? How is that water moving through our landscape? Do we have huge storms coming through? How is the humidity in our place? Also the air, how is it moving? It's just super windy, super dry. Do we get those sandstorms coming from all over the place? Or no, we are pretty still in the bottom of a valley? How are we for light? Are we a hot place? Are we a fiery place? Or are we a pretty cold place? So we need to understand those dynamics, which will also help with our plants, because we have to perhaps create some of those dynamics for our plants, perhaps to go into a flowering state. But perhaps more importantly, we're going to have to create an organism that might mitigate some of those extremes, because we are always trying to bring life back into balance, into some kind of a dynamic equilibrium. Without this dynamic equilibrium, we can all feel that in our lives. We are just all over the place. And there is very few organic molecules, organic beings that like to be all over the place. One day is 40 degrees Celsius, the next one is -10, and it's hot, and it's cold, and it's wet, and it's... So if we can create something that balances and create this equilibrium, we are moving in a direction that plant will actually become a healthy plant and a productive plant. Right, the last thing perhaps into that exploration of that environmental quality is natural succession. And that's perhaps the key element that Ernest really has brought into the equation, which brings everything together. So what is natural succession? It's just this movement in time and space. And as we do so, life gets bigger, right? So it's this constant process of life and death. And through living and death processes, we are able to accumulate life. We are able to grow from a volcanic rock. We start to have a few little organisms colonizing that rock and doing photosynthesis, moving to the ferns, moving to the gymnosperms, and finally, all over a millennia, million millions of years, we end up with our apple tree. So that is the process that we have to do. Imagine that instead of a volcanic rock, you just have a really degraded soil. How are we going to move from this degraded soil into those gorgeous apples? So we got to work with natural succession because it's a natural law that we must be working. So is this working through time? Really working through time. But naturally speaking, those processes takes way too long for most of us to really contemplate. I mean, we can definitely sit and wait until we have conditions for apple trees to grow. But to be honest, as Alan Savory really says many other times, we have degraded some of those environments so much that sitting and waiting no longer resolves. Perhaps the place where I live, which is quite magical, we got a lot of humidity, we got still lots of biodiversity, lots of forest around. If I sit and wait maybe for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years, I might be able to have conditions to grow an apple tree without any external inputs. Still not good enough, is it? No, we have lots of tools and exciting things we can do right now. But how can we use this process, this natural process, which is a naturally lawful process, but speed it up a bit? Right, here's one of the key kind of graphs from Ernest and the Life in Syntropy team. In my understanding, what we need to do is to have interventions that is timely, that we have a specific time frame that we are playing with, and we come and we intervene. And that's because those really long natural cycles, they have a really, let's say, different plants will have a different life cycle, but half of the cycle of a plant is the decaying cycle, is the death cycle, let's say. So it takes bit of time for a plant to come and grow and mature and produce, and then it slowly starts to come down, and then it has this death process. Once that plant died, then the next and falls over, then the next one comes up. And so everything takes a really long time in a natural successional process. However, if we are able to unite our consciousness with those natural forces, then we are able to speed up on one side. If you look at that accumulation system there on the left side, we are able to speed up that accumulation process. That accumulation process, let's say, from the images we've seen, is growing from the rock all the way to kind of the gymnosperms stage. So we have accumulated enough life, enough organic matter in the soil, enough living process to really go into the higher level productivity. And we do that by mimicking that natural process, right? A forest do not grow with one tree every 3 meters or every 10 feet. That doesn't happen. So why do we do our reforestation projects with trees every 10 feet? We are kind of asking for trouble. How does the forest organism, or how does nature works? It goes from 1 million to 1, right? So as soon as it has a change, there is 1 million plants coming up. And as time evolves, as some plants grow and die, we end up after 100 years or 1,000 years with 1 plant in that 1 square meter, because that's how it goes. Great. How can we use that power? But bring it a little bit shorter. So we start with the same strategy. We have lots of plants coming together, right? So we fully following a natural process. Lots of plants, different types of species coming together, planted at the same time, and we let nature take its course. And then what we got to do is use our freedom and our consciousness and our ability to see the whole. Because animals, plants, and minerals, they cannot see the whole. They are just within their own life. And then we can use our greatest gift or our greatest curse, freedom, to speed it up. So basically, when our human consciousness meets the natural forces, we are able to organize them and make them highly efficient. And in doing so, we make nature, which is very wise, freer, and we make humans who are very free, but not so wise, wiser. And it's a win-win situation. To me, that's how I see syntropic agroforestry. And the power of syntropic agroforestry is, in my mind, intrinsically related to how we are gonna engage in that process. So here's the question: how can I or we grow food regeneratively? Basically, creating unique. It needs to be unique because it needs to fit my life, it needs to fit my land, it needs to fit my climate, it needs to fit everything around me. So it has to be unique and it has to be living. It needs to be a living organism. And here is just a few little pictures to see how people in Germany are thinking, how Mark Lieber is thinking and creating his own organism, how the people at La Loma Viva is doing in Spain, and those beautiful family, the Abundance Project in France. Those are all living, unique organisms that we all have the capacity to create, as long as we start to understand where we are, what kind of soil we've got, what kind of climate we've got, and what we want to grow, and try and meet the two. But most important is we've got to participate. If we are not there to participate, does not matter how well we designed, how much money we spent sourcing plants, how much we've paid in our irrigation, and how good it is. If we are not there, actually becoming a part of a system, it's not going to go, because nature is chaotic. It requires an individual or a group of individuals who has self-consciousness, who is able to look at it from the outside. It's able to bring all of those variables coming together. It's able to use our power of imagination, and it's able to then process that information and imagine the future. And once we start to imagine in the future, we can start to act today, and then we follow through and see if that future is becoming a reality or not. So we must then be observing and monitoring those decisions and then taking it how it goes. One thing that we have to do is not to be a maniac in disturbance. We have to allow those organisms to evolve, to become whatever they will become. And we cannot force a particular plant to just grow. Otherwise, we are back into this controlling mindset. And here really is a co-creative mindset, right? We gotta give nature the freedom to become, the freedom to exist. And as we do that, we also harness the wisdom of it. And then together, we are able to create not only productive and regenerative landscape, but to be honest, absolutely masterpieces. I have not been to one syntropic place. Doesn't matter if it was done by Ernest or by somebody that has just done a course on the weekend, and they are stunning. As soon as we put lots of plants together and we show up, really, we've got no problems. But showing up, it's difficult in a modern age situation. Right, so just to conclude that first kind of stage of the presentation, what is syntropic agroforestry and what does it try to achieve? So that's a definition that I came up with. So it's an accelerated successional process reliant on conscious human interventions that increases the quantity and quality of life. It is thus able to produce human-grade food perpetually without any external inputs. So we have there nature playing its part. It must be naturally lawful, but we can speed it up through our conscious interventions. And the goal here, at least in the beginning, it's not to produce food, but to increase the quantity and quality of life, to the point that once life is actually thriving, food, human food, because most people are now eating food, unfortunately, that is not human grade, because they does not require the life forces that we need to evolve and to find solutions for our problems. So this is human grade food perpetually. I mean, perpetually, I put it forever, let's say for the next 30 years. I mean, 30 years in our lifetime, it's almost forever. And then a key point there is without any external input. Great, but this is a process, right? Doesn't mean that we can never use external inputs. Some people in the syntropic world says, yes, we gotta just go through a natural successional process. For me, it's all on the table. If we've got external input that will allow us to move and jump a few stages in succession, so be it. We just have to understand what are we using, how are we using, and what's going to be the consequences of those use, right? If I broke my foot and I'm using crunches, I think it's good because I can still keep moving rather than staying in bed with my feet up. But I got to understand that if I cannot get addicted to those crutches, otherwise I'm not going to learn how to walk again. So it's the same idea. We can use those crutches to get things moving, maybe to speed this up, to implement fully, but we gotta wean ourselves out of those addictions. That's my perspective. Might be different from Ernest, might be different from other people, but that's how I read it and how I try to at least run my systems. All right, so let's move forward into some of those principles and practices that hopefully help us to put that puzzle together in an individual basis. So the PPPs of Syntropy, so principles, practices, and processes. Again, a little bit from the literature, a little bit from courses, a little bit from myself. I put together 12 different kind of PPPs. Let's start with density and diversity, because if we don't start with density and diversity, then our systems are weak from the beginning. And from then on, it's just dramas. I mean, Syntropic Agroforestry for me, it's already a drama because it's alive. Anything that is a living organism, it's dramatic because it can move in all directions, and we are there, we are part of it, we have ensouled that process, so we are part of the syntropic system, so we will have some emotional challenges. It is a drama. To make the drama easier, perhaps harder, depends on management and times and things like that, we have to have density and diversity. How much density, how much diversity will depend on climate, perhaps, will also depend perhaps more strongly on your management capacities, right? But we cannot expect to have a fully forming, fully functioning organism, living organism that it's able to not only express itself, but comes up with new ideas, because that's what living things do. They come up with new solutions. If we want to have that, we need to have density and we need to have diversity. So if we have little management time, let's just do it small. There is no need to start off with an acre of a syntropic forest. 10 square meters, it's good enough. It's actually very good enough. So density and diversity. Without that, there is no power. It's really a car without fuel. All right, we got a plane in time. So we need to have an idea of, okay, in 30 years' time, in 15 years' time, in 100 years' time, what do I want out of that system? Right? So we are setting up a system from day one, and hopefully it will develop all the way to year 35 without any extra inputs. How real is that? Look, it's usually within a range. Some people, more experienced people, are probably much better to create a system that will likely not require any extra inputs. But to be honest, given the crazy times that we are in climate change and degraded soils, it's very likely that everybody will have to add a few plants unless we put lots of density and lots of diversity. But that's the idea, that we have density and diversity at all time frames. If we start with bare soil, we gotta mulch it, we gotta do something there. And our intervention has to result that in 30 days time, maximum, there is no bare soil, there is no more sunlight hitting the ground. We are doing photosynthesis at least at 100% capacity. And then from that moment on, 30 days on, to 30 years on, 40 years on, 50 years on, we want 100% photosynthetic capacity or more. That's it. Never again that sun should hit the ground. That's the idea. And we need density and diversity to be able to conduct the system. Our role is not to feed the plants. Our role is to organize that system. organize that interaction. We need a spirit to organize the matter. And that's what we are here to do, at least how I understand at least. Right, we got to move in time. So we also have to move in space. So stratification or lived area. So lived area comes more from the holistic management perspective. So we got to be looking, how can we be putting things into a spatial order? Not only on a horizon here, but also vertically. Should I have 4 stratas, as the theory says? Maybe. That will depend on your climate. How much energy can your climate hold? How much energy does your climate have? So in a really dry climate, maybe having 5 or 6 or 7 stratas might be better. So there is just so much energy, and everything gets filtered through. Oh, what's the proportion of my stratas? Again, we go back. How much energy have you got? How much humidity have you got? What do we want to achieve? But the game here is that at a minimum, we want 100% photosynthesis at all times. And then the higher the energy capacity of our climate, of our land, we are adding up those layers. The traditional kind of recipe of within Syntropy is 20% emergence, 40% high, 60% medium, and 80% or up to 100% on the low. So it adds up to more than 200%. Oh, how can you do more than 200% photosynthesis? Simple, because each one of them are occupying a different place in that spatial dynamics, in that vertical axis. Should everybody have 4 stratas? Probably not. I think the colder the climate, there is some dynamics we'll be talking about that I think individuals we're going to have to play with those dynamics. But very important that we are not only moving in time, but we are also moving in space. Next, we have covered soil. We need to have covered soil. In my opinion, bad soil should be an offense, and people should be paying a fine for it. I mean, not really. People should be conscious of the problem of bad soil. And we need not only mulch, dead material, covering our soil. Just like me, I have that material covering me here. I got a ceiling and I got a roof. Just imagine doing the presentation now here. It's probably 30 degrees Celsius out there. Let's say probably 90 degrees Fahrenheit out there. I would be cooking. It would not be pleasant. Probably the computer wouldn't even be working. It would be overheating. So the biology in the soil requires that as well. So a dead layer of mulch is very important. But we cannot stop there. We also need a living layer on top of that. And that life really gets going. Now we get living processes happening. We've got to remember that the most alive part of our planet is the soil. Is that kind of fine layer, is the skin of the apple, is the most alive part. And it's the one that we are harming the most. So if we don't focus on that first, we're going to have problems down the track. Right, another process, we need to be accumulating life, especially in places that are really degraded. Sometimes it's just going to be way too resource intensive to go and redo the whole lot. So we come and we get the mulch from here, we get seeds from there, we might have a few seedlings from here. In my understanding, we can bring a few fertilizers from there, and we are slowly creating living cells. Those living cells then that will be able to hold higher level plants, higher level organisms. And then from then on, we start to move bigger and wider. But that's generally a movement that we need to be working with. We are always looking at how can we accumulate life? How can life increase in both quantity, but more importantly, quality? We want higher life because only higher life forms can really, truly feed us. So we are always thinking about that. Is this action going to create more life? And we can take that question to all realms of our life. Am I going to drink this Coke? Is that going to be creating more life or not? I leave it to you to answer that question. We can take it to the biggest or to the smallest. Right, another very important principle. We got to be working with plants that work in our landscape, right? We got to be looking at plant ecophysiology, or how does that plant interact with its environment. There's a lot of people there thinking, oh, maybe if I create a living organism, I might be able to grow, let's say, blueberries here in my alkaline soil in such and such a climate. Why? Because then I can sell for a lot of money. So there's a lot of decision making there, or how can we grow specialty crops because we want the money that they will create. And I think that's a very dangerous proposition, because the whole idea is that we create a system that is resilient through the extremes. And as soon as we start to put plants that are not so adaptable, especially if they are productive plants that we have lots of interest into them, but they are not quite from that environment, it's going to be much harder to keep that plant producing without any external inputs. So it's very important that we select, that our backbone of our system must be plants that just love our place, just love our climate, just love our soil. We need those plants to get things moving. And then we bring productive plants that hopefully also love, or at least like, but definitely that don't dislike it, right? As soon as we have plants that that dislike some of those extremes, then we are asking for trouble. We are asking for financial trouble. We are actually asking for emotional trouble, because, as I've said, we install those systems. We become part of those systems. And one of the most difficult things that we got to do is actually kill productive plants. It's very challenging because we are part of it. But if we don't do it, things go pear-shaped. And the banana is a key example of that, how it ruins lots of tropical and subtropical systems because people are afraid of removing them. Right, moving on, organic matter production. So there's a lot of this. We need to be producing organic matter. Which organic matter? Does it need to be chips and wood and timber everywhere? Not necessarily. We got to be looking at another variable, which is decomposition. But to me, I like to look at organic matter production, not so much as for the organic matter, but what happens when we prune it? What happens when we drop the organic matter? And there is a whole stimulation under the ground. There is a whole change of dynamics. There is biology moving everywhere. There is hormone, there is roots exudates, there is plants going, oh, now I got more sunlight or more wind or more this. There is a whole change of spectrum. So even though, in the theory or however Syntropy is presented, we are always talking about organic matter production, I prefer to switch around and go, what can we do to really stimulate growth? So growing our own organic matter in our own system really stimulates growth when we come and intervene. So that's definitely something for us to be thinking about. Right, one that is not really talked about, and it's something that I bring from other frames of mind, especially the biodynamic and the work of Dennis Krochek, which is, we've got the ability with our consciousness to create a specific movement in time. It could be called synchronicity, or I prefer the word CZG. So CZG comes from the astronomical world, where different planets either create a trigon, or they create a conjunction, or they are opposite, or something like. So it's when things happen in time, and there is a particular point in time where those things lined up. And I find that very important for us in the syntropic system, that we are trying to create and really give that boost of life, that we bring lots of our practices to a specific point in time. So let's say the beginning of the growing season. At that beginning point, and then we bring everything. We come and we manage the ground. So we come and slash everything, organize, prune the trees around it. So stimulation, come and work on the ground and plant and mulch and water, and come the next day and observe. So we bring in lots of activities to one point in time, or very close together. We can even extrapolate and go into where the moons are, which planets are here. We can go as far as we want because we are free and we have the consciousness to do that. But that is very important. I see a lot of people, and me included, life is just so busy. Oh, it's halfway through the growing season. I'm just going to do it anyway. and I'm actually going to do a big system, and then we plant it and we invest and we put all those resources into it. And, it might start developing really well, but then it comes a really dry season, and then the organism hasn't really formed. Maybe a few things have failed, and then we just start chasing the system. And that's, again, is not a very nice feeling to have. So if we are able to really be strategic, look abroad, have all the ducks lined up, and we bring that into the best point in time to intervene. And we can also extrapolate that not only into our implementation, but also in our management, which perhaps might be even more important, is when am I going to manage? When I'm going to be opening up the system? When do I need to leave it closed? How is the weather doing? Is it too wet? Is it too cold? Is it too windy? Is it too hot? Is it going to be too hot? What should I manage just before? Should I manage a month before? So there is all those nuances that each one of us have to understand. And it's not an easy process. I can tell you it's not an easy process, but it's a very exciting process because we become almost godlike. It's really exciting. Right, pruning and disturbance, for me, that's one of the key principles that Ernest brought through his experiences and observations of what happened when a massive disturbance come into a productive system. And his experiences is with cacaos. So here we are trying to bring out of that idea, but it's not chop and drop. Sorry to say that. It's much more technical and much more time consuming than chop and drop. Because yes, we need to do proper cuttings. We need to be thinking about the plant. If I cut it here, how will that plant respond? Do I want it to fatten up? Do I want it to keep going? Do I want to kill it? And then what am I going to be doing with that material? Where am I going to be putting? How am I going to be putting? I've seen lots of people here in Brazil who are cutting eucalyptus and just organizing kind of more or less without chipping, but without a refinement of that process. And then we end up with sticks just like that. And sure, it's better than bad soil, but sticks that are poorly organized, they actually don't really help that much. They might just help a little bit of the raindrops not to come and erode the soil, but it's not what we want. And to be honest, organizing that organic matter takes more time than the chopping or the pruning. So in my perspective, in my practices, when we are working with really complex systems, we are not doing chop and drop. We are doing pruning and organizing. It's much more technical and much more time consuming, but also much more powerful. Right, selective weeding is one for me that I don't really like the name because I find weeding has a bit of a negative connotation. To me, selective removal. Oh yeah, actually killing plants. And that's usually plants that, for me here, the picture in the center is a very thorny plant, and I'm a bit of a barefoot gardener. And I just have to, it's a beautiful plant. They do amazing work. They're kind of the tomato family, but, they got such sharp thorns, not good. So I'm removing it, not because it's a bad plant, but because in my style of management, it really impacts me. On the left there, I'm just pulling a daikon radish out of because it was out of place. Nothing wrong with the plant, doing an amazing job, but I was in the middle of my veggie bed and was starting to jump on top of my lettuce seedlings. So it needed to be removed. And then in the bottom right there, we got to remove some big trees as well. They might come back or they may not. But a lot of the times we got to do thinning. We got to be removing productive plants. I got to be killing some bananas because if I don't, then succession will not move forward. So usually selective weeding or the selective removal of plants has to do mainly with management characteristics or needs, and also with successional movements. We don't want to be leaving to earlier successional plants in our later successional systems because they have different needs and cycles and things like that. Right. One that I've added here that Syntropy don't really talk too much is about the decomposition rates and the humus formation. There's a lot of people just doesn't matter which climate, putting, big, thick logs of timber in the ground. And, that's not bad per se. But in some climates, that timber is going to sit in that ground for 100 years. just because it doesn't have the decomposition rate. And that's why I really like that Britterness scale that Alan Savory brought to us, which really help us to understand, okay, where are we? Are we more towards the desert? Are we more towards the rainforest? And how it tells us is really how much humidity have we got through the year. We have just a very short window that in 1 month we've got all of the rain, and then the other 11 months is just dry. So that's going to be pretty much towards the very brittle. Or, do I just get kind of rain every second week and things like that, and I put a piece of timber in the ground and the things just melt away? So from where Syntropy came from the kind of the tropical area, we need to use logs in the ground, because otherwise there is no humus formation. Things are just so quick. If you look at the Amazon forest and you chop the forest down, in 1 year, that's it. You are back into a desert, because there is no depth of decomposition. There is no humus. There is nothing stable. Everything is just so quick. It comes down and gets mineralized. So in a tropical system, in a place that decomposition is really quick, we gotta put something that is lignified, something's gonna take a while, that is gonna stay there for a year or two, so we have a chance to create a stable soil. As we move into the drier realms, then we have to look at different strategies. Because really, if 11 months of the year is just bone dry, things don't decompose, they just oxidize. So then we need other strategies. We either make compost, or we bring some animals, like Savory does with his movement of herd and things like that. We gotta have a different strategy. Putting logs in the ground, it will help a little bit, but it's not really the material that system it's able to digest. And then finally, just to finish it off, we need to participate, right? So this is a few of my tools that I play with. There's different tools for different tasks. I am a researcher, so I'm always looking at different things, how I can do it. My toolkit now is much smaller, so we gotta be participating. We gotta be participating in a way that we enjoy. We gotta have tools that we enjoy using. We gotta be playing with plants that we enjoy playing with. But we also have to be trusting that natural process and have a lot of empathy for all of those beings that are occupying that piece of land right now. And that being might have a really bad reputation, because it might be a noxious weed, and you might actually be illegal to have it, and you have to poison it for some kind of legal reasons. And that's not how we're going to be solving problems. We really need to look at those plants and thank them, and those animals and thank them, because all of them, absolutely all of them, are on our side. And how do I know that? Because they have no choice. They have no freedom to be against us. They are there to move the planet forward. We are the only ones that can do harm, right? But because we are the only ones that are free, so we are still working on this power of freedom. Humans are definitely not bad. Let's say we are just a 17-year-old who got the car keys for the first time and think we know about everything in the world. And, when we reach 40, 45, and 50, we kind of go, hey, when I was 17, yeah, I don't think I knew much. So that's, I think, part of one of the most difficult tasks that we've got is just to step back and respect what is out there. Look at it in the eye and go, who are you? What are you trying to do here? How can I help you? And then we work together. Very difficult to do, but very rewarding once we start to reach that place. Now, really a place of curiosity, a place of admiration, a place of being blessed, even if we are in the middle of the desert. There's always things moving, trying to move towards more life. Every single organism in this planet is moving towards more life. We just have to start to see it. All right, let's move into the next pace, the next part of the talk. How am I going for time there, Julia, please?
Yeah, you're good. We're just coming up on 10 o'clock now, so you've been going for about an hour. Just under.
I've been going for about an hour.
Pretty close. Yeah, a couple minutes shy. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a bit much. Okay.
Yeah, it's going well. I'm enjoying it anyway.
Let's go. All right. So how can we put things into balancing? We got to be balancing ecological processes. And I've got two very interesting frameworks that I work with. The one here in the left is Dennis Klocek, he brings much more of the four elemental theories. And it's really nice for us to understand how are things moving on the elemental level, on the background. How is the earth, the water, the fire, the air, how are things moving? And on the right, we've got Alan Savory, again, holistic management with its ecological processes. And these are two very key complementary tools that we've got. So we've got here, how can we make decisions make on the elements? So that's a really nice drawing that we can start to understand where are our seasons. Here we've got winter there between earth and water. It might not be like that for everybody. And what does that mean? It's a wet process. So when we look at the dry, the hot, the wet, and the cold, it's what we call a tempering force, let's say. It's something that is moving. So by looking at that kind of figure, we can more or less classify not our climate, but perhaps our seasons. And that's very important for us to look at. We cannot just say, oh, I live in a hot and dry. No, I live in a hot and dry place from this month to the next month, and then it becomes cold and dry, or might become hot and wet, or cold and wet. So usually when we look at those elements, we have kind of those four groups. Of course, we can add more complexity into that, but we can start to think, if I live in a hot and dry climate, how does my syntropic organism needs to be? It needs to be something perhaps that is a little bit more toward the cooling and maybe towards the wet. So that's, once we start to look at those different forces and different qualities and how they express in our landscape, we are able to create a living organism that can balance it. So similarly, but perhaps from a different point of view, we've got those different ecological processes. So we've got the mineral cycle there. So we're looking about not only about the soil, but how are those nutrients moving up into the plant, down into the ground, on the surface of the ground, and then back into it. And then the water cycle that we've been talking a lot about and learning a lot from Zach as well. So we want our soil to be always steaming and breathing. If not, we've got a problem. We need our water to be always flowing and exchanging. It needs to be slow, it needs to be as steady as possible, and water will be always moving to its anomaly point, which is what? 4 degrees. So it's always wanting to be in that position, because it's the position, as Schauberger talks about, to be the most alive, the most capable of fulfilling its function, which is what? It's a function of exchanging things. In terms of our energy, we need energy all year, every year. How are we going? How is our stratus? What are the plants we are looking, the ecophysiology? And then our communities, we need to have a community, right? Nobody can exist by itself, be it a plant, be it a human, be it a dog, be it a rock. A rock with nothing else, it's a sad rock. So we need a community that is thriving. We need a community that is what? It's creative. Because if we are not creative, we are not going to be able to solve today's problem. Otherwise, and we can see a lot of that, we are trying to solve today's problem with yesterday's solutions. It just does not work. It might slow it down, but it does not solve the problem. We need new thinking, new creativity, and we need a community to come together. And that's going to be really our management, of managing our density and managing our diversity. Right, so climatic nuances there. So once we look, so we can see on both sides of the slide there, we've got the syntropic principles, the 12 that I kind of presented. So when we look our climatic, our seasons, or our cosmic rhythms, how are they? And each one of those principles, how can I play with them to balance it, right? So the question in the bottom is, how would you bring them into balance? And I really like that drawing by Dennis Klocek, where the biggest element, what's written in the middle there, even though we're talking about air and water and fire and earth, the 4 elements, the most important element is what he's calling the quintessential element, which is the man's consciousness. It's the human consciousness. So that is the most important tool we've got, and it's the tool that is getting constantly hammered by social media and all those other external powers. Unless we start to work with our imagination, our creativity, and our consciousness, and really putting ourselves in the world as a fully standing human being, and we are not an animal. If we think what an animal does, and if we think what a human does, we are very different. Doesn't mean that we are better, but we are different. Just like a plant and an animal are different, there is a a separation in evolution, there is a separation in evolution from humans and animals. And if we keep maintaining that we are just another, 1 degree better than an ape, then we're not going to be able to solve our problems, because we're not then able to take the responsibility that we're supposed to have as a higher being, not a better being, but a higher being with higher responsibilities. And we need to start working with those powers. Right, on the other side of the equation, we've got also holistic management. And what does it talk about as the main tool of management? Human creativity. Go figure. So here we go. We can be looking at our ecosystem processes that we've got there. And I've just got a few things down the bottom of the screen there. Wind, winterness, wildlife, are we going to be using natives or exotics? In terms of the water cycle, slope, aspect, the position, the bioregion, are we in a rain shadow or not? What kind of vegetation have we got? How is our small hydrological cycle? Soil type, decomposition rate, the humus formation, all of those things that we all have to individually assess to be able to create a solution that matches our problem. One of the key things in Syntropic Agroforestry is that the roads needs to be north to south, our planting rows. That's a problem, because we cannot have one answer to everybody's problem. So our north to south, what are we doing with our north to south orientation of our beds? We are maximizing solar orientation in the tropics. So we got to be looking at that. Do we want to maximize sunlight? If you are in a really dry Mediterranean climate, is that your focus? I need more light? Maybe not. Maybe I should be looking that I need more shade, and perhaps I'll organize my lines in a way that I have more shade. Or perhaps I need to work on my water cycle better. So perhaps instead of going north and south, which might go up and down the slope, I might go on contour. Yeah, it might be east-west, I might have this. And we're also going to be thinking about management, because management is going to make it or break it our system. So north to south, understand why. So all of those little rules that there is, we have to understand what is the forces behind it. That's what I really try to bring here. How are we going to be playing with those forces in a naturally lawful way? Not technological, because technological will create more problems. So we got to use our human creativity. Right, human processes. Complexity is the problem, really. We are living with something that does not conform to the physical laws that we so proudly put out there. Something that it's alive, and we really see that expressed in all human beings. It can go in any direction at all times. So a massive challenge there, a massive process for us, it's knowledge and experience. Because as I mentioned, expert advice can only go so far. And it's a trade-off. If you want to produce with no external inputs, we're going to have a lot of knowledge. We're going to have a lot of experience. But it doesn't need to be huge. It can be small, but it needs to start today. We start today with 1 square meter, 3 feet by 3 feet, and we get things moving. We really need to sharpen our observation skills. We really need to understand how are things moving in time. And with observation comes also contemplation, inner contemplation, so an inner observation, so we can try to imagine the future. That is a key skill that we are losing very far, because we are losing our potential for imagination. Why are we doing that? Because now all the pictures in the world, even when we are a little kid with 2 years old, we're not playing with little pieces and trying to think that this is a shark or this is the ocean. No, we have a shark. We have the ocean. It's all defined. We are not using our imagination to create the future, and we need to work with that. We got to work with trial and error. Sure, we don't need to commute. You don't have to commit the errors that I made. Hopefully you learn from me, but you're still going to have to make your own errors. If you are a freak that everything needs to be right and perfect, you're going to have a hard time with Syntropic Agroforestry, because things will go out of the plan for sure. We definitely have to change our paradigms. We have to understand that the world is it's not really how we see it. But if we put it together, if we understand and we learn to communicate, and everybody's free to give their perspective, then we can definitely learn. We got to be open for new things to get into ourselves And one of the biggest things that holds us back is expecting something to be as we planned. And that is a recipe for disaster. We plan, we implement, and we let go. The plan is then just a document for comparison, a document for learning. Decision making, that is something very challenging, because in those systems, we gotta be making decisions on a daily basis. Decisions that there is no book that is saying, oh, you gotta do this or you gotta do that. It's decision making based on reality. And that's very challenging, because we gotta show up. We can't really, we can plan to a certain extent, but we cannot rely on the planning. We need to show up. We need to have a look. We need to act. And then there is this kind of unconditional love, which you might have heard. What is unconditional love? Can we really do unconditional love? It's really easy to say that the natural world operates under unconditional love. I have no questions. I agree 100%. But the natural world is not free. So it does not have an option to not work under unconditional love. Whereas we do. We can do anything we want, and that's part of our learning, part of our evolution. So what it is to love? To love is to act. I don't like the word unconditional, because to me, there is always a condition, at least in our present state of evolution. But we must learn to love. And that is a massive process. To me, that is the biggest process that each one of us has to go through our evolution, and probably to a few more incarnations, is the challenge of our, let's say, our hierarchy, if we look at other hierarchies. Right. Human challenges. What else? Okay. So time management. Those systems require a huge amount of time. The more complex, the more time. We got to learn to do that. Knowledge, as I said, resources. Those systems, especially if we want to go big, they are very resource intensive. So we can go small and save seeds and do cuttings and all those things. Technical skills. This is a massive learning curve. Implementing, it's easy. Everybody can do, dig the ground, put some fertilizer, do this, and then reality shows up. We got to be going there and managing at appropriate timing and learning how much to remove or not remove. And that's something that we just learn with time. Sure, we can give you some tips and advices and help you out, but in the end of the day, you got to have to play. Physical capacity, it's a big thing. Are we going to be managing an eucalyptus or a poplar or some other tree that is 5, 6, 7 meters up in the sky? How are we going to do it? Are we going to be using a ladder? Are we going to be climbing? I'm going to be using a pole pruner. I'm going to be going on my knees for all of the morning. It requires a physical capacity, absolutely. Cognitive capacity as well comes with the knowledge, but really that ability of processing information in real time, not easy. Emotional stability. Those systems are very emotionally driven, because they are you. At least that's how I take it. They are part of you. They really are part of you. So if it's going well, you are happy and talking to everybody about it. As soon as you start to go pear-shaped, you start to get anxious and you don't want to know about it, all of those dramas. So be aware, it's a drama-filled activity. And one of the things that I found the most beautiful, but a big challenge as well, is to how can I then, given that it is part of my life, it is part of myself, it's me represented in a tree, let's say, in a living organism, how can I bring these rhythmical actions that I have to do, but in a rhythm that is related to it? So it's not only about my weekly rhythm, my monthly rhythm, my yearly rhythm, but also how are the seasons moving, where are the plants growing, when are they dormant, what are we going to be doing? And really, to finish here, we are always walking in the darkness of the unknown. So that is not, it's exciting because we are creating a new reality, but it's not easy, because every day is a new day and we have to refresh ourselves and move forward. So a nice challenge. Right, almost there, guys. Thanks a lot. So one there for you here, a little image. I'll let you sit for 30 seconds. And I would like to see if you can see the dolphins, because children under the age of 5 can only see the dolphins. Can you see the dolphins? I hope you can. Beautiful dolphins. Right, to finish it off, I can only finish with that I know that I don't know, but I know that I will know when I need to know. I don't really know who told me that, if it was an angel or if it was somebody else. I tried to Google it, and it's an unknown source. So it's out there. But it's really a sentence that helps me a lot. Really, really helps me. So I don't need to know everything now, but if there is something I need to know, then I will know when I do need it. Thank you very much. That's it for me. Sorry, I probably went a little bit overboard, but I tried to cram as much information for you there so you can have some stimulation there. If you want to play more with me, I run this Syntropic Agroforestry Masterclass. It's starting on the 22nd of March, so there's a little early bird offer there to the 15th of February. Any questions, comments, suggestions, please hit me out. Other than that, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I hope that was useful.
Thank you, Victor. That was awesome. Dense, full of information. Oh my gosh, you moved over so much stuff. I'm not somebody who has looked deeply into syntropic agriculture, mostly because I live in the Pacific Northwest and I think I've always shied away from the tropic aspect of syntropic. So yeah, so I know for at least for me, that was really fascinating. I'm just fixing people's control. So feel free, everyone. We'll do some questions and answers now. Raise your hand, pop it in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. And just to get that started. So one of the things that was kind of surprising to me is I didn't realize how much syntropic agriculture really looks at the landscape. And it definitely seemed like there was a lot of study into sort of systems, forest systems and how they function and all of that sort of stuff. But I'm wondering, you know, how much is that applied to individual landscapes? So I know like with permaculture, it tends to be about more like adjusting the landscape to the human needs. One of the things I like with Zach's methods is we dive so deeply into reading the landscape. And I was just wondering how much crossover there is with that.
Yeah, look, there is Syntropy and there is my Syntropy, let's say. From my perspective, reading the landscape and making the landscape humanable is paramount. So I love the permaculture principles. I love the idea of really going there, walking bare feet. You know, like maps, yeah, they can be helpful. But if we are not there, if we are not experiencing, if we are not really sensing the land, then it becomes a bit difficult. I feel that side of the equation haven't really trickled. I mean, it's within Syntropy, but it's not really out there saying, hey, people, we got to look at that. You know, you got to look at where you're going to put it, how you're going to put it, when you're going to put it. So yeah, that's how I see it. It's not explicit, it's in it. And that's why for me, there isn't a single framework in the world that solves the problem. And that's what I'm really trying to do. How can we get the lessons from all those amazing frameworks? Each one has a focus. So Syntropy to me has the best botanical framework. It's all about how plants interact, right? But then we have, holistic management bringing, hey, how does human interact with the wood? And then we got, Zach, and we go, oh, how the humans interact with the water. And then we got permaculture and how the humans interact on a bigger landscape. And then you've got, the gregarians or the scale of permanence. Oh, what is a logical way for us to be developing? And then we go into biodynamics and we go, okay, how now we connect with, as far away as Saturn and everything else. And then you go into Elan Ingalls and you go, how do we connect to the nematodes or anything else? So I think we got to start bringing all of those to give the tools. I think every time we go, oh, this is the solution, just make the best Johnson Sioux compost and you'll be right. And you go, I don't think so. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to learn everything and try to see the commonalities and go, how can we then go, okay, how can I help this person in this context to go, okay, for you, perhaps if you focus a bit more on your water cycle, you're going to have a bigger bang for your investment. And some other people, more in your soil, more in your plants, or whatever. I mean, to me, plants are everywhere. So that's why I love about the Syntropic framework, is that that botanical idea fits everywhere. But then we have to look at the needs, resources, and everything else that, to me, holistic management brings in, and really helps to clarify that. Otherwise, I mean, we can get so lost on the beauty of Syntropy, on the, you go into a mature Syntropic system, and it's like mangoes and papayas and bananas, and you go like, oh yes, I want this, and we forget about how hard those systems actually are to manage and really make it a part of our life. Because unless we are, let's say, a Syntropic farmer trying to do it commercially, which there isn't too many out there, most of us will have a day job. So how does that system fit in our day job or in our daily life? To me, is the biggest question. Because similar to Zach, where he's looking at decentralized water, I'm looking at decentralized food production, because to me that's the best food we can have. It's the best water we can have. It's the best food we can have. It's the best community we can have. It's the best of everything. I think we had enough of these centralized structures. They are killing the whole planet. They are killing our soul. They are just really, really, really doing a lot of harm. But it's not easy to pull away from it either, because there is lots of, we get lots of perks out of it, lots of iPhone 16s and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know if any of us can live without our gadgets anymore. Even I would have an issue, mostly because YouTube and podcasts exist. Half my learning now is connected to my devices. Although I still am a fan of books. I have a big bookshelf.
Yeah, but it's really that being able to discern when it's good, and it's such a fine line. It's like, whew, going from that technology is awesome to that technology is just eating my life. It's we all have our own challenges there.
Yeah, that learning curve is no joke. Definitely a real issue. Slightly different curve in different people. Some people have a more pronounced curve than others, but yeah, everybody's got one. But you were talking about food again. Have you ever come across syntropic methods used for, reforestation, rehabilitation, restoration work, or is it kind of primarily, because I know most people use it for food forest applications to grow food, but yeah, I was wondering what you'd seen outside of that application.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen mainly based on my own practices, because when I was in Australia there, and jumped on the Syntropic bandwagon, and soon realized that economic viability with that type of food production was very difficult, or almost, I'm not going to say impossible, but very, very difficult. I started to look at other avenues on how can we apply those ideas into regen work. And I went and did a certificate 3 there into, got qualified as a landscape kind of restoration, bush regeneration, and started to apply those methods. And look, it's next level. It's the difficult part is to convince mainstream, especially at least in Australia, in my experience, 95% of the funding for bush regen comes from public sources. And then when it comes from public sources, they want to use what is, the best method. And the best method is glyphosate heavily used and really chemical based. So that was the biggest challenging. It was convinced that is not the best method, but we have much more power. They might be more costly early on. The first year might be more costly, but if we do it right, it's the kind of thing that depends on environment, but it's the kind of thing that in a fraction of the time, maybe a third of the time, you don't need to show up anymore. And it was really interesting. I've actually just did a little community event here in the end of last year, and in a friend's property, and they had done already 2 regen projects. One was, and both were part of a course, but the second one, I actually did the course. I was one of the students. And the way that they do regen is the same as everywhere. So they come, they use the glyphosate to kill the existing vegetation, and then they plant 1 tree, usually a secondary or climax tree, because that's the kind of tree they want, the kind of forest they want, one every 2 meters, 3 meters in all directions, and walk away. And then they go, okay, so then in 3 months' time, we're going to come and we're going to remove the grasses that have regrown. And just is this kind of nasty war type of mentality. And the plants just die or does not succeed. So then, she invited me to go over there. I looked at the landscape, super steep, like literally, I don't know, like it's almost a wall, like super steep, very difficult to accumulate life. So I look at it, they used to have cattle on the land, and cattle tends to create little contour lines or almost on contour lines. And I said, okay, we're going to follow the cows. So we went there, literally a feet wide little pathways on the land, on contour, but also going up. Went there, removed the grass by hand so they wouldn't come back. Planted one tree every 50 centimeters, mulched, put a whole range of seeds into it. And it's been 3 months. Sure, there was some deaths. It's almost inevitable when we're planting climax species coming out of the greenhouse into the reality, and you get a week of 40 degrees Celsius or whatever, 110 Fahrenheit. They cook because that's not where they're supposed to be. But 90% success rate, biology coming back, whole diversity. And it's almost like, it would be good to manage, but even if we don't manage anymore, it's almost job done. And people go, oh, but every 50 centimeters, like, yeah, every 50 centimeters. So we'll create a canopy. We will close that, and we will have a chance to survive. We're not going to be chasing ourselves and spraying chemicals everywhere. So those little trees that are completely out of place, can thrive. They will never thrive if they don't have something around it. It's just like I can go to an intensive hospital and sit in a bed and be fed intravenous, and I will look beautiful, but I'll have no life. That's our agriculture. That's how we do it. So if we want to regen, we got to bring the life with it. We have to have an organism that has a heart, that has a lung, that has a liver, that has kidneys, and so it's able to move around and balance itself out. So to me, at this point in time, is the best way to make money with syntropic knowledge is to apply to regen, because there is good money in regen, and there is the expectation that it requires management. So that's exciting. Most projects that I was playing with, they make a big budget to show up like 5-6 times a year. If you do a syntropic regen system well, you probably don't need to come back 6 times a year. You might come back 2 or 3 times a year, but you're going to plant 5 times, 10 times more plants. So you're going to have this higher cost of your own. And then people go, oh, blah, blah. But I go, look, you pay more now and you save millions in the end. And you just create a magical place that people actually want to be there. Like you go to some regen places where they just, they inject trees with glyphosate. Like, you don't want to be there. It literally looks like a moonscape. It's like there is no life but a few little seedlings trying to survive. It's like, so it's not a human place. So I think with that we can create, human regen systems. And then why not put a little apple tree here, or a little, something that you might just go, oh, I'm just going to see how that apple tree is going. And then to do almost unconsciously, we are getting lots back, because we're getting our mental stability, we're getting our health. We go there, we have new ideas, and everything is moving. It's, to me, is where the money is at the moment with Syntropy, is on regen.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. We talk about ROI as being financial motivation, being about money, but the systems that I'm trying to help build, that it sounds like you're building, like, we're focused on, there's an ROI on labor, where you do have degreasing, where you're talking about, you put a lot in right at the beginning of the system, with the idea that the system can be somewhat self-supporting. The more developed, the more mature it is. And yeah, and I think that's a really interesting perspective, looking at all the different factorials. But I want to pop into the chat for a second. Becky just asked, do you have any tips for arid arid, semi-arid areas.
Yes, absolutely. So step back. What is our arid, semi-arid? Usually hot and dry. So we need to create something that kind of cools and it stops that drying. So basically stops the sun and stops the wind. So then next stage, what plants like to grow on those environments? Lots of cacti, lots of juicy plants. So just on those plants, you have both. You have a windbreak and water that you can chop those plants and put on the holes of your precious plants. And there we go. So really working with plants that love those environments. You have to find those plants. And then you got to create systems that will then factor for that. So semi-arid places, they are using a lot of those aromatics, really powerful plants, all the rosemaries, all the sages, the artemisias, things like that, because they grow quite quick, they're quite stable, they're kind of evergreen most of the time. Putting them on the side of the beds, they don't stay too high, easy to manage, and then you can put a lot of things. But if it's really towards the semi-arid, then all of the cacti, the agaves, the prickly pears type of plants, and just lots of them, lots and lots of them. And really don't be afraid. I mean, it's funny because there is a learning curve of what it means density, because people are used to density being 2 meters apart. That's very dense when people are usually going 4 meters apart. But what I'm talking about here is 1 centimeter apart, or even close to them. Like on my systems, in one is like 3 feet by 3 feet. I will have at least 100 plants into that. Sure, it's not going to be 100 trees. It might be 2 tree seedlings, and then 20 tree seeds, and then green manure, and then other plants and sticks and things. That's what we need to create. We got to go from nothing to full growth, especially on those climates that the growing season is so tiny. You got to make the most. So when there will be a little rain event, that's when the system needs to be implemented. And then, boom, then you create something that can hopefully withstand the extremes. If you've got a little bit of irrigation, will definitely help. Will allow you to go perhaps straight on into some more productive plants. But a very good strategy that I don't see it done too often, and I don't do it very often either, because I like the food production, is to really invest 1 or 2 years into accumulation, really understanding that there is a process in succession. The world didn't go from rocks to apples. It went like this. So if we spend a year or two just bringing lots of plants that can thrive in this locale, and they start to create a much more stable, much more resilient environment, and then the wind is not so drying. Now we have a little bit of shade, and then we can manage and bring some new plants in. I think there is a bit of a misconception, and I think it's unfortunate, where people say that you've got to plant everything on day one and you never have a chance to come and bring new plants. That's not true. The plant world is extremely flexible. It's the water world is the plant world. If there is anything there, it's flexibility. So, but we got to do is create that first environment, and then we've got options, and that is the beauty of syntropic systems. That with an effort, there is a cost, but then we have options. Because the worst thing for me is look at the landscape and go, man, we got nothing to do. Whereas when you go, man, there's too much to do. I'd rather be on the too much to do than the not enough. And then once we've got too much, we can scale down. But we have to have that experience. We have to understand what is too much. Because what is too much for me, it's going to be different than what is too much for you. We could be neighbors, we could be brothers and sisters, but there is different capacities. So we got to start small, super dense, super diverse, make the thing explode and go crazy, and then we start to go what works and what doesn't work for me. But definitely doable on any climate, really. We just have to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, and I really want to stress that for everybody watching. Overplanting is just not a problem. Like worst case scenario, the plants are going to die and become, nutrients, fertilizer, that biomass that you need for the next generation. Best case scenario, they make it through to a seeding and then they die. And now you've got their seeds in the seed bank for when the conditions are right, they will germinate. So you're putting those species into the seed bank, even if the conditions aren't right currently, they will become right potentially in the future. And it really is just like throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it and letting nature kind of work it out, just giving it as many ingredients as you can and letting it decide what the recipe looks like. I think, I think that's a great point. And to the extent that, I work with nature and I get that question all the time, how far apart should I space these things? And there's that aspect with trees where, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. But a lot of times I'm like, look at the 2 trees you're buying. You can dig one hole and stick both of them in there. Like they will grow on top. They'll work it out. They're so happy entwined with each other, and living on top of each other. They're really cool in cooperation. So yeah, I love that you've talked about that today, and that really does come into play with like Becky's question, where you're looking at these different conditions and you don't necessarily know the best approaches. Sometimes it is just throw everything at it, throw all the natives, throw all the food stuff that will grow in that zone, whatever it is, just throw it all at it.
Especially as a first step. As a first step, like don't be too selective, just do it. Is there a problem of having too much? There is a problem in terms of productivity if we can't manage. So in terms of regeneration, I can't see a problem. Too much is always good because we always have something thriving. If we want to produce, then it's when we have to be a little bit more in tune to what can we do, what might be impacting something else, which is different into the regen. Into the regen, it's, just let them be and they work it out as long as there is density and diversity. But if we want to harvest, then it becomes a little bit more finicky. But in the beginning, which, I tell my students, don't worry about harvesting. Really don't. We are working towards a harvest. That is part of the objective. But if it doesn't matter. At the moment here, we are trying to understand, which plants thrive, which plant combinations really work, which plants I really like to manage, which plants fulfill a specific function. And a function is, is a time and space thing. So which plants might produce organic matter in the first 3 months, or organic matter after 3 years, or produce in 3 months, or produce in 3 years, or holds water for the dry season, or has good shade in the dry season, or insulate for winter. So we start to then learn which plant will really thrive at specific point in times, and then we start to be a bit more design kind of. Okay, so I'm going to put this plant at this space because it grows this big, this quick. Now we've got real information to work with, and that's why I said in the beginning that I find sometimes that experts cause more problems than good, because they come already with a good design, and sometimes it works, most often it doesn't. Whereas if the person behind that design and just put everything, that person in one season will know how things have moved, and then next time that person will be able to design something that, in my mind, not even chemists will be able to design, because that person will be designing something that is working for him or her, literally. And to me, that's the cream. It's really exciting.
Yeah, agreed. Fantastic. I just want to touch on this point. Taylor pointed out that it's similar to the Miyawaki forest method. I know for me, I kind of think of Miyawaki as the unaccessible syntropic forest, where you're really trying to create that density, whereas like Syntropic is more accessible, but they're both very much operating on layers and really understanding how a forest dynamically works. But yeah, I was wondering if you had a thought on that comment, because I think they are very similar, but I'm not great at Syntropic, so I don't know.
Look, similar idea, density and diversity. Perhaps the Milwaukee spends a bit more effort into the soil preparation. Some of the ones that I've seen, they kind of dig up 2 meters, perhaps a bit more resource intensive in the beginning. So that would be a difference earlier on, more resource intensive in the Milwaukee. But then, I mean, Syntropy really, it's all about management. Whereas Milwaukee has, in my understanding, very little management, maybe a little bit of management in the beginning, removing some of the pioneers, and then let go. Whereas Syntropy, we are managing until we die. I often get the question like, oh, after how many years do we stop managing? Never. You know, production and management are same thing. If we want to produce in those systems, we got to keep managing. The question is, what is my management capacity? So that is really the defining factor. But we'll be managing until we die. And that is, you know, it's tricky because we don't like to do things until we die. But that is very exciting because we're going to be learning things until we die, because every year in a syntropic system is a new year. And that is, again, something difficult to deal with, but also something very exciting. You know, year one, you learn how to control maybe some of the weeds and harvest some veggies, maybe some berries in the beginning. And then you have to start, you know, pruning trees to conduct them, and then shade. And then, you know, that pecan nut we're only going to be producing after God knows how many years. And here we are going, and then we're going to be perhaps harvesting some timber. Like, it's a perennial skill building. It's a perennial going, I don't know what to do now, but I'm just going to try this. I'm going to talk to somebody. I'm going to do some research. And it's frightful and exciting. That's how, yeah, it's really a drama.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and great explanation. I'm glad I asked you that. Because yeah, I think that was even more than I'm thinking. I've definitely done some work with Milwaukee forests, but yeah, I think that really helped expand things. I just want to go to Ben's question. He's wondering about your seeding methods. Do you have any particular techniques? Do you do broadcast? Do you do targeted seeding? Do you seed balls? Is there some particular method? Yeah, what's your preference for seeding?
Yeah. On my, let's say on my trees, because there is seeding on the interrow, I just then broadcast a mixture. So we call a muvuka, let's say. So I might have a whole range of seeds. So I might have, let's say I'm going to do a change of pasture, and I want a specific, let's say, grass type or perennial type. So I'm going to have that one pretty much at 100% to what is recommended in terms of rate per hectare or per acre. And I'm just going to spread. But then with that, I will probably have a lot of support species as well. So let's say example that I'm doing here, I'm putting some Panicum maximum grass, not the Mombasa one. I'm putting the Masai one, which is a smaller one, because I feel the Mombasa causes problems. So I'm going there at 100% the recommended rate. And then I put maybe 20% of millet. I put maybe 20% of buckwheat. I might put maybe 10% to 15% of crotalaria. Might have there 5% of daikon radish. So I create a few things, maybe 5 or 10% of sunflower. So even for my grass, I'm creating a bit of an organism. And then that one, I mix all of those percentage seeds in one big thing. And as I throw, I'm already throwing them at a percentage. When it comes into my actual my tree row, then I'm not a big fan of having seed balls, of putting lots of seeds together. I've done that. I don't know, I find it a little bit messy. I prefer to go and space them out and have a little bit of a strategy. So let's say in my systems here as well, I usually have, pigeon pea, a leguminous one. Like the names doesn't matter. Just in different plants. So I have a pigeon pea that I have lots of seeds. I have crotalaria that I have a few seeds. I've got castor oil that is, very, very fast, got lots of seeds. And then I'd be a bit strategic of how do I want to manage them? How fast are they going to grow? Are they going to just go and close it and become a nightmare? Or are they a bit slower growing? So for example, pigeon pea is relatively slower growing. It might take them 3 or 4 months to really bush out. So I actually put one seed. I just kind of get the seed by hand, and I just go and sprinkle maybe one seed every 2 centimeters. Castor oil, for example, which is a plant that grows horizontally really quick with massive leaves. I put 2 seeds every meter on my bed, and then I select the best one and let them go. Crotalaria, if I have plenty of seeds, I might do something similar with the pigeon pea. Otherwise, I might be a bit more strategic. Also, we got to be thinking, what seeds do we want? For example, one seed that I really use a lot is the arrowroot, the Cana edulis or something like that, the scientific name. And I really like that. And I used to put it on that same kind of center row on my 3 rows. But it's one that is a bit finicky to manage because you got to go really low and chop and drop, and then there is all those kind of trees in the middle. So now I give them a little bit of a spatial separation. I might give like I don't know, 15 centimeters, half a foot. And so I put my 3 row, maybe I'll draw that. So I might have my kind of my planting row there. I might have the row that I worked. Here I have my trees with some of my seeds in the middle. And then I might create, let's say this might be my eastern side. I might create a row here of my arrowroot. And I put just arrowroots, for example. And then I might create here on my western side, when it gets hotter, I might create something. I might even put the pigeon pea here, or something that grows a bit taller, or even a vine crop that I put on a tomato plant that I put on a wire or something like that. So I'm always thinking as well, what is the sun doing? Where do I want that plant to be? Early in the season, later in the season, how long is that plant going to be in the system? The arrowroot's going to be many, many, many years. Pigeon pea, it's going to probably stay 1 year. Some of the crotalaria just 3 months. So we always got to be thinking about what is the cycle of those plants, when I'm going to be managing, and then I can start to organize them within the bed. Management will be the key one. But I've done the seed bombs into specific places. And I mean, when I first learned, they used to have the eucalyptus. So they used to have an eucalyptus that they plant a seedling, and then they have about 10 centimeters or so on each side. And then they put just the seed bomb over here. And I had some really bad results. I was working on a really, really bad soil, like terrible, super hard clay, like dead soil. And I had very, very poor germination rate, even though I prepared the soil, I made it well. And then if you're only going, if you're going a seed bomb here and then a seed bomb there, if that one fails, now you were there. And if that one fails too, now you start to have big gaps in between those seed bombs, let's say. And that created many problems for me because, as I shared, having too many plants might be a management problem, but having not enough plant is really an anxiety problem because also with seed bombs, think about their life cycles and what kind of life cycles are we mixing on. If I'm using a seed bomb, I'll probably be mixing more kind of pioneers and secondary plants rather than kind of the really quick ones. I'll be more comfortable separating the quick ones, making them easy to manage, and then leaving some of those gaps as pioneers and secondaries. And they will be mainly for, I would say, for just biomass production and stimulation, the kind of management that you just kind of grab and cut. That will probably be the kind of management you are thinking, rather than going and selecting which one is doing well. So got to think about, what do we want out of that seed bank? If I want to really select the best specimen there, the best tree, then not so good to have 20 plants growing that close together, because it's going to be very difficult to see which one is doing better. So I'll then spread them about into strategic positions or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I do like to make sure people know, if you are going to work with seedlings and pots, if you want to germinate outside of directly into the soil, if you want to germinate somewhere else than where it's going to live its life. Biopots, I cannot recommend them highly enough, especially the ones made out of cow dung. I really, really love those. They're a great source of fertilizer, and you don't have to disturb, especially if you're growing things like oaks, which, a lot of those oaks, you cannot touch that taproot. If that taproot grows down to the bottom of the pot and then you're unpotting it to put it in the ground, it can be really, really, you're just going to lose a lot more. And being able to leave them in the pot and put the whole pot in the ground, I found is really effective. So I just like to make sure everybody knows that anything that will biodegrade in the soil, they make them out of paper, coir, all kinds of things. But like I said, I like the cow dung ones the best. But staying on the plant, sorry, go ahead.
No, just growing your own seedlings is an amazing learning experience as well, and saves tons of money, because in one afternoon you can propagate 1,000 plants and off you go. And if you are in a climate where the growing season is kind of limited, if you can bring 1,000 plants that are already this big, I mean, your system just explodes that much quicker. And it's exciting. I mean, you in a small place, even if it's really cold, you can put a few heat mats or a little greenhouse or something like that, and you are living the drama already, so you know already what to expect. Because plants will die, there will be some fungal diseases, and it's really nice to do experiments as well, where in the same little pot you put 2 or 3 different species, one that's longer and shorter, and so once you put that into the ground, you already got almost an ecosystem going by itself. It's be creative. It's an amazing, very important first step. Saves tons of money, and really it speeds up the process.
Yeah, 100%. It was one of my biggest product lines when I was doing nursery stuff. Was to have these big biopots that you could put straight in the ground, and like you said, have mixed species in them, have a really diverse, had some ground cover, some mid-level, and then something that was going to get really big, sort of tree canopy in that, and having it all in that pot. And it was like a ready-made garden that people could just stick in the ground, all natives, and it was just going to spread over time. Took a lot of the guesswork out of it. So I love that. But staying on plants for a second, Derek was wondering about Jasminium grandiflorum. I don't know if you've worked with this one or jasmine in general. He's wondering if it works, like how you would work it in a syntropic system. It's a plant that needs sun. It grows as a bush, and it gets pruned at the end of the season. So around, in the northern hemisphere, it would be November, December, I'm guessing. So late fall, early winter.
Yep. I don't know the plant, unfortunately, but let's just look at some of those characteristics. So I think the first question is, what function do you want that plant to fulfill? So I think we begin with that. So maybe a shrub there, maybe you wanted some wind protection for your beds, and you cut it down the bottom. So I don't have a visual of the plant. So if you can let me know a little bit more about it, but that's how I'll be working. Asking I want you to fulfill this function in this climate. So is that flowering? The blooms are picked up. Okay, fine, perfect. Okay, for the flowering. So you're gonna have to have a system around it that allows it to do that. So let's say if it's a small bush and requires full sunlight to be able to go into flowering, then whatever you plant there, either gonna have to be managed being chopped so that sunlight can come and hit it, and then it can trigger the flowering, or you're going to have to create a system where everything around it, at least at that time, is smaller. Or it could be a plant that works for the first year or 2 or 3 of the system, and it's helping also as it's growing to create conditions for something, for a tree to grow that will then stay there for longer. So it really depends what you want out of the plant, how long do you want it to fulfill that function, and when are the key times that it needs to receive what it needs, be it water, be it sunlight, be it those kind of variables. Hope I helped, but not knowing the plant is kind of, but yeah, that'll be the idea.
No, I think, that makes perfect sense to me. And I think that's kind of the main thing is talking about it from the point of view of its aspects, its functions, makes a lot more sense. It does appear to be a species of jasmine that is vining and is primarily from, I think it said Southeast Asia and parts of Africa. Yeah, definitely not one I'm familiar with, but I will say when I saw that Jasminium genus name, my nose lit up. I was like, I could smell it. Jasmine is a smell that you don't
Yeah,
forget. I feel like it's such a good one. So yeah, for perfumery, that makes total sense to me. Um,
yeah.
I'm gonna
Just
go on. Oh, sorry.
a note on vine crops or vine plants. They are amazing. They are super powerful, but
Hmm.
they require extra care because they can quite easily take other plants out of the equation. So in my systems, I mean, unless there is such a need, and if there is such a need, you're probably going to be paying attention because you're going there, you're picking flowers, you're observing things. So that's better. But a lot of the time, we might use some of those green manure crops that are vines,
Hmm.
uh, and they can create big problems. Even some productive plants like passion fruits or pumpkins or something like that, be aware of them because sometimes a week or two that we didn't pay attention, they grab it into a plant and snapped it or bent it, and then there'll be all those other management work. So just vines are great, but usually they play a function more in a system that is more established and more stable. So
Hmm.
early in the piece, they could be very handy, but they could be very destructive depending on the management.
Oh, that's such a great point. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Um, yeah, and then Tony asked, what about issues? So I believe he's asking about like seeding. If you're seeding fruits, what do you do about issues where when you finally get the fruit, it's not great? And these are, of course, issues that can be avoided with grafting. But if you're just doing broadcast seeding or you're letting seeds fall from fruit trees, obviously it's not going to be true to species. So yeah,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's a the theory of syntropy says that planting from seed is the way to go. Let's do everything from seed. My theory is, what do we want? How quick do we want? And how do we want to play the game? I love grafted plants. I love seedlings. I love cuttings. I love seeds. I love everything. So to me, I like to play with a full deck. So I have a range of options. If I am planting a tree, a productive plant, that most often than not, their seed is not true to type, I'll definitely be getting some training to grafting. Otherwise, it's very disappointing. I mean, to me, that is the best of both worlds. If we can do that, like all my avocados here, for example, I've bought some grafted plants, and avocados for me is one that they just die on me when they grafted. But when they are from seed, they just pump. Like same environment, same bed. I have got avocado seeds that are side by side. The grafted plant has not grown an inch, and the other one that was a seed 6 months ago, it's almost a meter tall. So there is a power of working with plants that develop from seeds. Their roots are just that much more resilient and conducive to the conditions if they prosperous. And then I would just be grafting. I think, grafting, why not? Let's bring some modern technology into the equation and let's work it. But if we don't want to go there, because then if we are grafting in situ, we might have to be doing a few more, let's say, technical management, opening up at a particular time, might be a bit more technical. Look, what I do, I plant the seed and I buy one grafted plant. So then I also have my Zion to put on the rootstock once that plant grows. So I like options. That's my approach. It might be a bit more expensive. Yes, it is. But in a small system, it's very worthwhile because then we always have options and it's much more fun. It's really much more fun, more resourceful. We don't have to go there, but that's my approach. So we really, at the end of the day, we got to look at the context of that person and say, okay, I've got limited resources, or I don't care, I can wait 15 years, and then we craft the best strategy for that. But let's not be rigid that everything needs to be from seeds. In a lot of climates, unless you've got a really good watering system, if you plant everything from seeds, you're going to get 5% germination rate. If your soil is really poor and you don't get enough rainfall, it's just, I've seen so many people do that, and I've done that as well. In the beginning at Gabala Farm, because of the expensive, we were trying to create seed-based systems. To me, it's not worth it to have just seeds because everything eats seeds. It needs a specific temperature, specific humidity to trigger seedling. Some seeds will require also to break the dormancy of it. So it's not just throwing things. And then we stay on that anxiety mode for kind of weeks on end. Is like I've planted some bananas here 6 weeks ago, but we've been having such a cold summer, and none of them have popped up. And I'm going, come on, man. And they might be gone by now. So I don't like it, but it's doable.
Yeah, I always thought it was really interesting too. Seb Holzer talks about some grafting techniques, and I kind of looked into it a little bit, and it seems like humans have been grafting since long before agriculture as a way to probably for harvesting, for propagation purposes, but also just for healing purposes and fixing trees that have been damaged, using it to help the trees stay strong and make it through storms and things like that. So I think it's one of those things where, it could fit in really well with syntropic agriculture, like you're talking about, because you are looking at this evolution, and the human influence was such a big part of your presentation. So I think it's really interesting. I always love, if we can get back past that, 10,000 years ago, get past sort of the what we think of as kind of farming, which is really only one style of farming. We've been farming for much, much longer than that as humans. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I'm digressing because, we're in plants, and that's my world, and I love them, and I could talk about this all day, but it looks like we got through all of the questions. So I just want to put a last call out. If anyone has any last questions they want to get out, please do feel free to raise your hand. I don't want to miss you. And I know Victor's happy to go as long as people have questions. So yeah, if anybody's got questions, raise your hand, stick it in the chat. And while we're giving people a minute, Victor, do you have any closing thoughts you want to leave us with today?
Oh, just do it. Like, it really is. I mean, if we can get caught into all the plant combinations and management techniques and things like that, and look, reality always shows the way to move forward. So to me, it's just, we gotta just do something that fits in our life. A small test plot tomorrow, even if it's a complete failure, we've learned so many lessons on how to dig, how not when to plant, or things like that. So really just do it. And if you need some help, call it out. Syntropic Gardener is there, happy to help.
Absolutely. Yeah. And don't forget, everyone, that, Victor's teaching a class. So if any of you guys want to dive deeper into this, all of the contacts and information are available in the Skillshare post in the community, if you forget any of those links. And Victor, do you want to just mention that code one more time? You were doing a discount for your class. What was the code for that?
There is no code. You can just go out there in the website, syntropicgardener.com. There is two formats of the masterclass. One is that it's an independent, similar to the Water Stories. There is a more independent one and a more supported one. So as you scroll down, it's already discounted. The 20% is already discounted.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so there is no code at this stage.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Victor, for your time and for your information, for sharing with us. We really appreciate it. This has been a fantastic session, as usual. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, everybody have a great day. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It was been fun.